Hey guys, I just want to take a few minutes and talk to you a little bit about your final project. I know we're kind of coming down to the last few weeks of the class, and I've talked to some of you guys about the project and wanted to just take a few minutes to give you a few tips and talk a little bit about what all we'll be doing. Now, by this point, all of you have probably had time to look at the feedback I provided on the first section of the project, which was the project proposal that was due back on September 30th. So I tried to provide you guys with as much feedback as I could so that you could make those corrections. I also have another video posted under the research project tab and under content. That folder that talks about generalized feedback on the proposals. So please watch that video as well for some helpful tips on the overall project. Now, as I've discussed in previous videos, this class is a culmination of this entire project. So, every assignment that we've completed has worked toward this final project. So now we're kind of coming to a head. So, of course, the first sections will be your project proposal, your revised ones, of course, right? So be sure to take time and spend time with those. Overall, I noticed there were some issues with literature reviews, so be sure and take a look at those literature reviews and think of them in terms of, an all-encompassing view of your topic. And I know I've told a few of you this, but, my view of a literature review is this. It's a triangle, an upside down triangle. So I know this is a poor representation of a triangle, but at the top you have your broader section, and at each side you talk about your dependent and your independent variable. So those two things, you can talk about based on the literature separately. You can see the literature that talks about sleep and, how important sleep is. What is sleep? Why is it important? How does it affect our health? Da, 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 da. And then you talk about your intervention, your independent variable on the other side, and talk about it. And then you kind of narrow that down to that point in the triangle and to where you got there. You're essentially taking the reader on your thought process on how you got to that particular project. So because I know this about the dependent variable, and I know this about the independent variable, it makes sense that these two together might cause this to happen. So you're telling them this via your literature review. So I'm a very visual person. You guys know this. So helping put a visual in my mind for it, when I'm organizing my literature review, because that was one of the hardest parts for me, was organizing helps. So I hope that's a little bit helpful to you guys in this process. So be sure to look at those literature reviews, and also your research questions. Be sure that you have a clear, measurable research question that I can understand exactly what you're doing, how you're measuring it. Your measurement needs to be in that research question, okay? And again, if you want more information, refer back to that video on the feedback for the research proposal. So take a look at that. Big thing is this one in the research proposal, your tense for this was future tense because you were working toward the project. At this point, we've collected data, and when you submit your paper, the project will be over. So you move your tense into past tense. So when you're writing your paper, so be sure to write your paper in past tense, okay? And basically in this section, you're adding those two additional sections to your research project. And I'm going back to look exactly what they are. The results section, which discusses, your data. That's where you'll have any of your charts, your charts you did in your discussion. You can provide that in your project there, all your data sets, all that information. And then the discussion section. So this is one of the most important sections of this proposal in my view, because you get to talk about what happened with the research. Did it work? Did it fail? I mean, what were the issues surrounding this? And how did that affect the research? So I know in your readings this semester, we've been talking about reliability and validity. So this is your opportunity to talk about the things that happen and how they affect reliability and validity. How would this be replicable for another researcher? Or is this really something that is unique to your situation? Which a lot of times for this type of thing, what you guys have done, doing research on yourself, kind of is a little bit unique. So everyone's going to have a certain level of bias because of you're doing the research on yourself. So subconsciously, you want your research to be successful. So that's a consideration. So when I'm reading these sections, I really want to have an understanding that you guys really took the time to evaluate the research and how things were going and how things affected your research. What were all those external factors that could have affected, like say if you're doing research on sleep, what were the other factors that could have affected your sleep beyond what you were researching? Could there have been anything to interfere with that? Because when you read about these big research studies, it's all about mitigating those kind of risk factors, those outlying things that can affect the quality of the research, because you don't want to have research and it shows such a positive result and then in a certain population and then it not be replicable because it was just unique to these individuals because of a certain other type of instance that made it unique to them. So you have to kind of think about all those little things that could affect your research and could this be replicable for a larger unit? So it takes, if you're kind of curious about that, I would suggest look at some of the articles that you're seeing, maybe in your literature review, and see how they addressed their discussion section, and kind of look and see how they talked about reliability and validity, and I think it'll help give you some clarity. But also, certainly, if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer anything. Just contact me. And the purpose of this project and in this class is just for you to engage in research and get used to thinking like a researcher. So when you're doing research, maybe on a single subject, when you're doing therapy and you want to collect some data and understand if this intervention is really working for this client, the mind frame, how to mitigate those external factors that we just talked about, how to think through that process to have something that's evidence-based and truly measurable. So that's what I'm really hoping that you guys get out of this class, is just the ability to engage and know what to do when the time comes and you're doing research in your own practice. And be sure to provide clear results, and think about all those different ways you can present that. You can do it in graphs, data sets, all these different ways you can present your results and talk about them, so you can get to be kind of creative there. And mistakes are okay. It's just I want to see that you identify the mistakes, because if I read that and I see large mistakes in the research process, and then we get to the discussion section and I don't see you addressing any of those, that's more of a concern to me, because the learning process didn't happen there, and I can't see that you I could identify those issues in research. The fact that there are mistakes in the research is fine. It's going to happen. It happens to large researchers. I mean, large studies, there are issues with studies, and your research may have failed. It may not, your intervention may not have been effective, and that's okay. It's not about passing the class because your research worked. I don't care if your research worked. That's not part of your grade. What I'm looking at is that you understand the process and you can talk about it in your discussion section. Okay. Be sure to, when you're writing, to make it reader friendly. Assume that your reader knows nothing about your project, nothing about social work or your intervention. Okay, so write it. It's just like, in my other job, I do grant writing, and, manage grants here at Concord. And we always say when you're grant writing, you write on a 5th grade level. Okay, you write to make sure that no matter your reader, they can kind of understand what you're talking about. And it certainly gets muddied when you have scientific, research and things like that. But be sure to spell out everything. Don't leave any assumptions in there, okay? Just be sure to reach out. I also will extend the offer, and I've told some of you this already. If you would like for me to look at your paper, your final project paper in advance and give you some feedback before you turn it in, I'll be happy to do that. Just give me plenty of time. Okay, give me at least a couple days to look at it. Because schedules get a little crazy around the holidays here, so and certainly I can't juggle a bunch of them right before the due date. And in order to give you time to make changes, please try to get those to me as quickly as you can if you want me to review them. So, and if there's anybody who still hasn't turned in the research proposal, you need to get those in as soon as possible if you want the feedback for your final. So I hope this is helpful to you guys in preparing your research proposals. So if you have questions, like I said, reach out. Don't hesitate to call me, email. So you guys take care. Bye.